Final Stop Brazil. Book 2, Life After Hell. Chapter 47. My sambista, Geo. The apartment was not just a flat, but a small two-story half of a house, with a garden and all the trimmings just for me. It had been built recently, but still needed a lot to be done here, so that it would be really nice. But what I saw, I liked very much. Upstairs, an open large bedroom with a veranda. On the ground floor, a small living room and an even smaller kitchen. Next to it, a bathroom, including a shower. The house was located behind a covered space which the owner rented out for parties. The entire premise was secured by a large gate. Pirata, the owner, was an old friend of Tania's mother, a very nice and witty guy. I could not believe my luck. A few days later, everything was sealed with his wife, and to celebrate the day, Pirata invited me and Tania for some beer. Later, I watched again from Tania's balcony how Geo was dancing to his terrible music, what they call pagode de Bahia, and again our eyes met. Suddenly, I realized who he reminded me of: Tony. Although, long ago, I had forgotten how Tony, my first love, looked like, but now I saw him quite clear before me. Geo had a striking resemblance to him. Soon would be the Dia dos Namorados, Day of the Lovers, and my decision was firm. I would not spend the day alone, but with exactly this man. Meanwhile, I also got to know a lot of children in this road, and lost my heart on them. Especially Ada and Rafael, two 13-year-old boys, became my favorites. They took me into their community, just like I was one of them. They were very respectful, but openly showed their affection by hugging me with every greeting. I was sure this was the place for me, where I could be happy. Tania and Marcio had long since noticed the electric tension between me and Geo, and tried now to establish the whole thing a little. Tania told me a lot about Geo, showed me photos of joint parties with him, and remarked he was a very nice and helpful guy and a good friend. A girlfriend he had not. He only lived for his two children, for his music and his muscle training. My colleagues, however, couldn't find it funny at all that I moved to Itinga, told me that it was just as dangerous there as in the Piedade, and in any case, I should be careful not stay out late at night on the street, and I should take the people in Itinga with caution. They warned me. Fabio, who became my favorite colleague because he possessed the same kind of humor as me, and we got on brilliantly, warned me that especially at carnival time, the buses in this direction were often robbed. However, in general, we took it all from the humorous side. Saturday, Tania and I were cleaning the house until noon, and Marcio brought a sofa bed, which Tania's mother had borrowed me. We then returned to their apartment. After lunch, we sat outside and promptly met Geo on the street. Since there was still no movement between us except of meaningful looks, Tania and Marcio began now from scratch with a formal introduction. This time, he gave me kisses on my cheeks. I was blown away. Geo was actually the man who made me forget Leo. We quickly came to a casual conversation, and I liked him at close range even better. Tania's mother came by with friends at this moment and proposed we should meet all in a barbecue restaurant nearby. More specifically, the one in front of the house where Leo lived. Now Tania was making nails with heads and asked if Geo wanted to join us. At first she refused, to my great disappointment, because he wanted to go to the Praia do Flamingo, meeting some friends, as he said. But on the way to my house, he crossed our way again. As it was common everywhere, he walked around with his beautiful naked torso, taking the beer back to his place he had just bought. For a moment he just stood before me without saying anything. Tania and Marcio had discreetly walked on, and I went into the offensive. All or nothing. We invited you, but you said that you have something else in mind, and now I meet you here buying beer. I think you don't like me, I muttered, playing upset, but spoke with a deep look of my blue eyes into his black eyes. I will put on a shirt and follow you, he only said, but his eyes said, everything is possible. I whispered, I'm waiting for you. Tania doubted. Joe will not come. Forget it. He is much too shy to come to our full table to join us. Under the influence of some beers, I didn't take it too hard and flirted with a man at the next table. But then I was convinced to have some beer too much and already suffered from hallucinations because I saw an appearance standing in the entrance, but was not sure if it was Joe. The man waved and made signs. Still, I hadn't realized that this was my sambista. When I finally responded and hurried to the entrance, he was gone. Tania did not want to believe me when I told her this. Phenomenon. Tania and I had now a permanent phone line if we did not see us in person. That was how I learned after my return to the center that Marcio had given Joe the same evening quite provocative slogans like, you coward, you can't do it. But Joe had defended himself that he had come very well to the restaurant, but he was embarrassed to join us at the table because of the crowd. He had, however, given me signs, but I did not respond. He then had returned home. I want this woman in any case. Vou beijar ela na boca. I will kiss her on the mouth, he had added. I cheered when Tania told me, piping hot about this conversation between Marcio and Joe. I could not believe my luck. A little house for me, lots of new friends, and a new love. Since I still had to move things from my apartment in the centro to Itinga, I loaded my bag in the morning on the shoulder, took it to work, and then rode to Itinga to unload it in my house, where I planned to sleep this evening for the first time. I did not want to ask Icaro for help again, and did it alone this time. Of course, it took me some time to bring everything, bit by bit, from the centro to Itinga, and sleep back in the center to pack more things, and to bring them again in the other direction. All at once was impossible, and therefore I had yet to commute for a few days. After unloading everything in the house, I made my way to Tania and Marcio. Joe sat in front of his house, my sambista, as if he had been waiting for me. A little shy, he greeted me, but I drew him pretty quickly from the reserve. During our conversation, I realized that Joe could be very funny, although I had a little trouble understanding him, because Joe had a speech impediment, and I had to ask twice several times. Was this the reason he was so shy? I had long since settled beside him after I learned from him that Tania and Marcio were not at home. Later, both came hand in hand walking down the road, and were obviously satisfied with what they saw. First, Tania told Joe about my pretty little house and the large bedroom on the upper floor, whereupon Joe interjected dryly, this must be changed. The bedroom must be down. Confused, Tania and I looked at each other, but had to laugh when he explained, when I'm drunk, I'm not going to make it up the stairs. Best thing is to open the front door and fall into bed. That's it, so you have to change it. It was obvious to Tania that she could not ask me now to join them, so they both went home without me. With Joe, however, I couldn't get forward, and certainly not under the nosy eyes of the entire neighborhood, watching us constantly. How about taking a walk with me? You could show me a little of Itinga. Of course he wanted. We walked pretty much straight through Itinga, past the favela, where he warned me never to go through this alone, but with him nothing would happen to me. They knew and respected him there. I could imagine this very well. Finally we reached the Praça de Caranguejo, a large square for festivities of Itinga, with bars, restaurants, and food stalls all around. Music was played here, kids were playing until late at night, and we sat on one of the benches and talked about our shared possession for samba. Now and then he looked deep into my eyes. I felt hot and cold at the same time with his looks. I furtively looked at his perfect and toned body and his beautiful face. Gio explained to me all the places in Salvador where samba was played, planning already to go with me to Pelourinho, historic center of Salvador, for some show, and we spontaneously decided to go together to Salvador Festa, an even bigger event like the one I had been to last time, with pretty much all the stars of the samba scene of rank and name. Before we returned, I took the initiative and kissed him. He returned my kiss tenderly. His reticence, however, waned with every time we stopped and kissed, to continue on our way, holding hands. He showed me a lot of Itinga. We went back another way, where he pointed to a settlement, still under construction, and I could hear out of his remarks that he dreamed of a cute little cottage there. Future plans? I was completely happy, head over heels in love, and I knew that Geo was the first man with whom I would sleep for the first time since 4 years. But how quickly this would happen, I had no idea at this moment. Back in front of Tania's and Marcio's apartment, we noticed that everything was dark. Geo suspected that the two were at Marcio's mother, at the end of the road. She asked me to come in when I asked there for Tania and Marcio. A little embarrassed, I politely declined, on the grounds that I was not alone. Marcio's mother looked somewhat confused at Geo, who kept a little in the background. Told me then the two were long since home and slept. Should this now be the end of this wonderful and romantic evening? Geo brought me up to the door of my cottage, where we initially said good night with a passionate kiss. We kissed more wildly. I felt his excitement when he pulled me close and pressed his body against mine. I was too, and there was no stopping. "Do you have condoms here?" I whispered in his ear. Of course he hadn't. This indeed none of us had expected. Geo rushed home to fetch them, but was back after a few minutes. My first night in my house. I would not spend alone. That could only be a good omen. On the couch, spread to a double bed, Geo lost all his shyness when he covered my body with kisses. He was pretty strong built, so I got a little scared. It was so long ago. I felt totally confused, like a young girl before her first time. It was great with him, but I was kind of glad when it was over. Much more I enjoyed our tender kisses as he pulled me into his arms, and we were snuggled up close together. I was at that moment perfectly happy, and felt completely agitated. First he indicated that he would go home, because he had to get up at 5 to go to work, but then he stayed with me, and we exchanged tender kisses and caresses again and again for the rest of the night. Despite the heat, I had terrible chills, was glad and thankful that Jill was with me, and I could cuddle up with him. He seemed very concerned, and asked if I was sick. What was wrong with me? I could not say myself. I didn't feel sick at all, just extremely happy, but with chills. At 5 in the morning, we got up together, and with a tender kiss and the remark that it was a wonderful night, Jill said goodbye. We agreed to meet Wednesday at Tania's and Marcio's place, since I had to sleep this night, unfortunately, in the center. While I showered and got myself ready, I let the entire evening pass my mind like a review, and thanked God that at last he was gracious to me. Geo was the man who had made me forget about Leo, and not only this, I was in love, and would do everything for not losing this man. No problems, no hassle. A man like Geo needed to keep his freedom. Since I could not make coffee in my house yet, I usually went over to Tania, how she had suggested, having breakfast with her before work. At 6, I was outside her house when the door of Jill's house opened, and he came out freshly showered and ready for work. When he saw me, he came across the street, took me happily in his arms, and gave me another tender kiss. And this he did in the middle of the street where he lived. There was no must for him to do so. I didn't expect this of him. Tania, whom, of course, I reported what had happened in the night, was flabbergasted. But she was convinced that this kiss in the middle of the street he lived could only mean he stood up to me and our relationship in front of everyone. A very good sign. I could hardly wait for the time until Wednesday. Tuesday evening I went to Itapua. Since I hadn't heard a long time of Michael, I called him from a cyber cafe via Skype. Practically the cheapest and easiest way for international calls. Michael assured me that he was well. He had good chances to achieve his own flat, told me that he was still with the same German girlfriend, and wanted to make up his secondary school after he had the flat. That was the prerequisite for the acquisition of qualifications. Funny German logic. Well, I let him know that he could reach me at the moment only by my mobile phone, because I had moved again and had no landline. I also told my son Happy that I also was in love all over again with a Sambista. Frankly, Michael wished me happiness with my new boyfriend, then my credit was used up. Geo was far and wide not seen, and didn't appear either. Tania told me that strangely he wasn't around anywhere on the previous day. Frustrated and angry, I went to bed alone this Wednesday evening. At least he could have called me. The next day I put credit on my cellular so I could hear from Tania if she had spotted him somewhere, because inevitably I was back in the center. I had to finally come to an end with my relocation. Jay was still vanished. I slowly began to be concerned about him. Could I not even be a little happy? Was it not granted to me at all then? Unintentionally, I was reminded of Collins and the day when I learned of his fatal accident, just before we wanted to take an apartment together in Spain. I felt very bad about this memory I had repressed for so long. But what if perhaps something actually did happen to Geo? There was nothing I could do except wait. I resolved going to ask his friends the next morning to learn something.